Hi, my name is Brian Venton and this is another My Town Media opinion piece. Queensland Council elections will be held in March 2024, so I thought I'd do an opinion piece on our local government associations. In June 2023, Canberra hosted the National General Assembly of all Australian local government associations, referred to as the ALGA. It is a not-for-profit national lobby group that engages the federal government in advocacy on behalf of all 537 councils. Each state also runs their own form of not-for-profit administrations who are actively involved in advocacy on behalf of councils in their respective states. So let me make a few observations from what I've researched. First, local government and the culture of incivility and acrimonious behaviour. Victoria by far runs the most coordinated and structured advocacy administration on behalf of that state's 79 councils. Their annual report, though, disturbingly refers to a research paper titled From Online Trolls to Slut Shaming, Understanding the Role of Incivility and Gender Abuse in Local Government. The report surveyed more than 200 councillors from all 79 councils in Victoria and found 56% of women councillors who were unwilling to recontest the next election had been subjected to bullying and harassment during their time on council. 27% of men reported the same. Now that, I suggest, is an indictment of the local government political process. Abuse seems to be the tool most often used to control or eliminate opponents from political discourse. I suggest the main driver is probably the rise of partisan and factional politics within the sector. Control over narrative often necessitates the elimination of critics by whatever means. Then when the South Australian government in 2022 legislated and enforced a model behavioural management policy on all its councils, then you know that you have a real problem. I'm told bullying has been happening at Townsville Council for many years. One informant describes the working environment as toxic, forcing many good people to vacate the administration. Now second, state and national not-for-profits are decision-making influencers. They're often involved in both the formulation, recommendation and facilitation of policy down the line, and then advocate and lobby up the line the motions moved in the various forums that they participate in. For example, there were 1,100 delegates in attendance at the last National Assembly. A total of 260 notices of motion were considered and voted on. These motions addressed the financial sustainability of councils, climate change adaptation, renewable energy, transport and communications, disaster preparedness, closing the gap, the voice, the circular economy and housing issues. Then at a state level in Queensland alone, there were another 130 motions formulated through their assembly to be pursued. Now that's a heck of a lot of action points being progressed annually across the nation. I suggest these not-for-profits have effectively created an entirely new level of bureaucracy and decision-making, feeding a mindset of indispensability, influence and power within the Australian political landscape. And that mindset is hard to wind back. Then third, the not-for-profits appear to have intentional motives. At the National Assembly, they advocated for and succeeded to reboot the federal body called the ACLG, that is the Australian Council of Local Government. This body was a federal ALP initiative from Prime Minister Rudd days, and it builds on the Australian government's commitment to work with local governments to build livable and socially equitable communities in Australia's cities and regions. Now that might sound quite innocuous, but the body exists to progress government priorities through to local communities in partnership with the ALGA. The government website says councils are a trusted partner and fundamental to the development and delivery of policies and programs for all Australians. Most councils would not be aware that their representative not-for-profits are effectively partnering with the government to implement state and federal agenda in our communities. 4. Globalist narratives influence council policies. Mayor Jenny Hill of Townsville is one of 4 directors of the Queensland not-for-profit. There are another 12 district mayors who then form the organising executive of 16. They collectively meet 6 times a year, and this is their words, to discuss and determine council policy directions on behalf of councils. The chairman is Mark Jamieson, who is the mayor of the Sunshine Coast. Now, both Townsville and Sunshine Coast councils are at the forefront of driving smart city narratives, which includes the implementation of the UN 17 Sustainability Goals, Agenda 2030, Net Zero climate policy, and digital technologies. Both councils and many others throughout Australia are annual applicants and regular qualifiers of the International 21 Smart Cities program run by the Intelligent Community Forum based out of Canada. Now, last year, 3 cities, Geelong, Sunshine Coast and Townsville, all qualified in the top 21 smart cities and were vying to be top 7 finalists. Both the Sunshine Coast and the Greater Geelong Council reached the final group of 7 smart cities of the world, but they were unable to progress any further. Literally dozens of other councils in Australia have been either infiltrated by or are affiliated with and or are adopting globalist agenda as policy positions. At the National Assembly, motions 82 to 92 on climate change and energy were particularly instructive. There was a bucket full of motions supportive of the climate net zero narrative, and they were all carried. Interestingly, motions 93 proposing nuclear energy as an option for baseload power was struck down and it failed. Motions 95.1 to 4 proactively supported the Voice to Parliament and the Makarrata Commission, and they were all carried back then in June last year. Many councils, I suggest, misread the Australian mood on that issue. Now, all of these motions only require a 50% majority for them to become national advocacy positions. And when 50% of our councils vote in favour of these issues, it reflects just how many have been captured by globalist narratives. So where do we go with all this? Interestingly, many people recognise what is happening and are pushing back by seeking to become councillors and mayors in their respective jurisdictions. George Christensen, the former federal member for Dawson, has now put his hand up to run as a councillor for Mackay Council. And he says, over many, many years, the tentacles of internationalist outfits like the UN and the World Bank have wrapped their way around local governments and city councils the world over in an attempt to circumvent democratically elected national governments and implement their unpalatable schemes. He says, I'm stepping into this fight because someone needs to stand up and say enough is enough. I won't just roll over and let globalist agendas bulldoze local values and freedoms. It's time that politics at the council level was truly local and not part of some globalist agenda. Now, I agree, but what are your thoughts? Things are not always as they seem, and we have to engage the political process if we expect to see our communities flourish instead of becoming pawns in a global game of controlled chess. Now, I trust you've found this opinion piece helpful, and I'll catch up with you another time. And remember, vote wisely in the upcoming Queensland local elections. Thanks for watching. Bye.